Hi everybody, thank you for joining us for this BRANDstand Brainstorm. I'm Anna-Marie Solowij, Creative Director of BRANDstand Communications, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of beauty retail, how it is now and how it's likely to be in the future. So in the week that Boots reopened 200 of its beauty halls with zero testers, touch-free makeup consultations and staff wearing PPE, it's clear that the post-lockdown world of beauty retail will not be the same. But that's not to say it'll all be bad news. Hygiene levels ought to be unsurpassed. Consultations may include more meaningful conversations rather than just sales patter. And then the web-based business will be able to play to their strengths. To debate the issues, we have an expert panel of store and online retailers with us today. We also have our audience. Hello, and thank you for joining. I'm going to start by asking the panel questions directly, but audience, if there's anything that you want to ask, please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them one by one. But first, let's meet the panel. I'd like to introduce you to Rachel Horsefield. Rachel is CEO Beauty at the Hut Group. She joined the company 7 years ago following a 5-year career with Boots. Based in Manchester, the Hut Group is the proud owner of several premium skincare and beauty brands, including Espa and Illamasqua, as well as Europe's #1 online beauty retailer, Look Fantastic. Next, we have Alexia Inge, co-CEO of Cult Beauty, the online beauty hall of fame that features only the best hero products from across the globe. Alexia honed her skills as a trends barometer and storyteller, working in journalism and PR before co-founding Cult Beauty in 2008. The business has been on the leaderboard of the Sunday Times Fast Track 100 and International Track 200 for the last 3 years. And they also bagged the coveted Women's Wear Daily E-Tailer of the Year title. Last but by no means least, I'd like to introduce Jo Osborne. Jo joined Harvey Nichols in 2002 from Harrods, where she had begun her retail career in the late 90s as a management trainee. Jo started at Harvey Nichols as a PA and worked her way up through the business before she was appointed to the board in 2018 as the Concessions and Beauty Director. Jo recently left Harvey Nichols to relocate with her family to Canada to commence a new career within retail. Thanks so much to all the panel for joining us. Your time's precious, but also your expertise, your knowledge, it's all what we want to have today. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts.
Hello, and thank you.
So let's begin with the questions. And I'm going to ask this to all of you, but Rachel, if you'd answer first, that would be great. What worked for you during lockdown and what didn't? Any learnings that you've come away with?
Hundreds. I think one of the key things, the great things about THG is we already had a number of global offices all around the world. So for a business of our scale, being able to work remotely, fortunately, a lot of those processes were already in place for us to be able to do that effectively. I think one of the things we're probably most grateful for as we've come into the lockdown period has been the data that we're able to access on our customers. So for many people don't know, but THG actually began life as a technology platform. So all of our websites are hosted within that platform, which means that we're able to access customer data live time. That's provided us with numerous learnings, especially in those first couple of weeks as consumer trends started to change, products that people were looking for started to change dramatically. And at Look Fantastic, we're really a celebration of all things beauty. So when consumers start searching for, we want a box hair dye to top up our roots because the hairdressers are closed, we were able to react really quickly and partner with brands and have those on site and available and shipping to customers within the first couple of weeks.
Okay. What about you, Alexia?
Yeah, we definitely found the same thing, like reacting quickly to the different waves of behavior that happened. I mean, I call it the loo roll month at the beginning when everyone went mad for basics, and we sold more deodorant in a month, I think, than we have since we started. You know, and really kind of getting into the sort of what do people consider beauty essentials, which is quite a wide range. I mean, I think you sort of your normal person would go in for the shower gel and the shampoo, but actually for a little bit more beauty obsessive, I know my list is rather a lot longer than most. It's like panic buying. I think we experimented with shift patterns in our distribution centre, and actually we tried two different shift patterns to enable a proper social distancing and to keep the staff as safe as possible before we actually landed on a third version that actually has taught us so much about running our own distribution centre at times, you know, where you get these massive peaks and troughs. I think the learnings we will definitely take into the peak periods. Hopefully there is
Christmas for 3 months, isn't it? Sort of.
I mean, yeah, just very, very unpredictable traffic. With hindsight, it's very predictable. You're like, well, of course people did that, but actually at the time you're like, wow, this is all happening.
Has it changed your buying patterns? I mean, I know that things aren't going to be the same afterwards, but have you considered more doing shorter buys, less deep buys, to be able to react quickly to things, so you're not sitting on stock that doesn't feel appropriate?
We're very light. We're very light on our feet, so actually the way Cult Beauty's run works very well for that type of behavior, and ultimately actually the type of behavior we've seen in the beauty industry for the last 4 or 5 years has been very changeable. It has been something you've just needed to work with and react to and hopefully predict as much as you possibly can. But I think being light on your feet has been a really, really important thing over the last 3 months.
Thank you. Jo, what about you? What worked for you during lockdown? And what
well, for me, knowing that I left Harvey Nichols just after the lockdown, one of the things I think was really interesting is how, you know, we've never seen stores close. I think that was quite an emotional thing for people and staff, but it was mainly about still keeping that connectivity with people, both, you know, those that haven't been furloughed and keeping that skeleton, the team that are still there and being able to work, because, you know, we've been very much an office-based environment, those that are in head office, and learning in different ways how you can communicate with each other, like we all are now, like on Zoom, Teams, and still continuing to keep that momentum. I think that's been a massive change and drive, particularly even for the teams that are all still working really, really hard. But as it's an omni-channel, you know, they've got bricks and mortar, there's online. So it's about shifting that pattern from really, because it's always been much more a retail stores than online. And I think seeing that change, like overnight, that you're literally, the full focus is then on driving online. I think that's been a massive learning for the business and the people, and just keeping that spirit of everybody together, I think, has been one of the biggest things, as much as, you know, understanding how people, and as both Rachel and Alexia have said, trends and things like that. I think the people side and the motivation when you're going through things at home, worrying about people that potentially have been unwell, I think keeping that together, I think, has been really interesting and really something to learn to forever, really.
Given that your entire career has been with predominantly bricks and mortar businesses, and then latterly with the sort of the kind of the parallel world of online, and given that you're moving to the other side of the world, but you're going to remain in the industry, do you have a view as to what shape bricks and mortar specifically will take post COVID-19?
Yeah, do you know what? And I've watched so many, that's the thing, being at home, I've been able to watch so much more and really learn. I think there's a couple of things. I think the connection with what you can get through going into bricks and mortar. I mean, I've lived and breathed in bricks and mortar, you know, I was even like at 16 working on the shop floor, and I'm a real people watcher, you know. I love, as soon as you walk into that store, seeing the people, getting the energy, that real buzz and feel, you know, as a customer, if you're going shopping, you quite get excited. The same as I think that you feel online, that you know that gift's coming, you know that product's coming, but being able to touch and feel and communicate with that, the member of staff behind, get that buzz from one another, I think is something that will continue. I think safety is absolutely, you know, from start to finish, that will be all the retailer will be thinking about, making sure that the customer and the employee is the first thing that they think about. I'd also like to think, you know, that this time has been used when people can really focus on the creativity and what the brand stands for. And so when those bricks and mortars open up again, seeing what had been going on in the high street, you know, outside of, you know, not just beauty, but the likes of the Debenhams, the House of Frasers, being really, really able to define what that brand means. And I hope that using this downtime, whilst it's probably been completely manic for everybody, knowing that it's like drive, but also seeing it through to the other side as, what does your brand really stand for? What does it mean? There's so much, you know, the society aspect and bringing in that real buzz and that newness, I think, because if we go back to where we were before, I'm not sure that anyone's really learned anything either. And people love going out. I'd like to think, you know, people are going to want to go back out there and really go back into stores and see how that environment has changed. So I'm actually generally really excited. I love the shop floor. I know that there will be some hesitance, I think. You know, I've spoken to the retailer that I'll be going to work for in Canada, because they've opened up all of their sites now, and they've said footfall is down from where it was before, but actually ATV and margins are so much higher than where they were before. So I think people are actually actively going out there, and they're not just, oh, you know, I might just get that mascara.
It's more conscious, isn't it? It's more conscious consumerism. We've been talking about this all along, but this is actually it. If you're going to leave the house for anything, you're going with a purpose and with a destination in mind, and very much with a product in mind. I would imagine it will change the sort of browsing culture quite a lot, certainly initially. So, as you say, it'd be all about ATV. Alexia, I know that you've done bricks as pop-ups as part of your physical version of your online offering. Do you think that that's something that there is a place for within your business in the future?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we go more and more online, I think it makes humans crave human contact more and more as well. I think it's all about having multi-dimensional shopping. It's the touch and feel all the way through to the kind of very quick buy it now, get it now side of things, and then there's a whole wealth of things in between, whether it's customer events, whether it's online events, and actually sort of the learning process that that people enjoy more and more around beauty. I think something that I've really seen surfacing over or noticed more surfacing over the last 3 months is this whole concept of beauty as a hobby. In the same way that people have taken up baking, I think that people who weren't necessarily, you know, it was that sort of perfunctory beauty. Well, I don't have mascara, I don't get it on, look it pretty, whatever. And actually people have actually started to discover they've got the beauty bug a little bit more so you've always had the beauty obsessives and the people that are really focused on it, but I think there's a whole new group of people that have come to this category. And I don't know whether that's because fashion wasn't so easy to get hold of, or your fashion fix wasn't as easy to get, but it feels like there's a new cohort in town, and they are ready to learn, ready to discover, and that needs to happen in a really 360-degree way.
Sure. Moving on to because you've been such a champion of indie brands right from the start. You've kind of put so many of them on the map. You've sort of brought them up from sort of newborn to, you know, kind of teenagers and beyond. Do you think that lockdown has leveled the playing field for the indie brands? Because what I've been aware of is lots of the kind of unsung heroes, the sort of local brands, British brands. There's much more of an appetite for supporting the independents rather than the big boys. In the same way that we're probably all shopping on our own high streets rather than going and doing the big sort of corporate supermarket shop.
I think there is definitely an appetite. The consumer is much more interested in this area, and I think that also linked to what I was talking about before with this beauty hobby. We're seeing people buying much more broadly across the site, so not just coming in for a Tilbury product, but actually really going for the more niche, like a Milk mascara and a Tilbury product, and actually kind of going on that voyage of discovery that I've always advocated. But from a business perspective, indies do not sit on big cushions of cash. And the ones that have kept themselves lean and been and sort of very much concentrated on online as well as their bricks and mortar strategy, I think have found it okay. But that side of it is really tough. And I guess there was another point I was going to make. Supply chain.
Sure.
Supply chain is just a nightmare for them, because ultimately, if they're sharing manufacturers with bigger businesses, they're always going to be last in the queue for ingredients, componentry, and the formulation process themselves. So, keeping the stock flowing has definitely been harder for the indies as well.
Must have been very up and down. Rachel, I'm interested in what Alexia said about people, the sort of beauty hobbyists. And have you noticed that people are shopping across site and more? And do you think that's because they have more time to browse and learn? So they've used this sort of spare time to kind of become more familiar with a wider variety of brands. Have you seen that on Look Fantastic?
Yes, definitely. I think, the great thing with beauty as a category, it's a real feel-good factor. It's a real feel-good category for people to shop in. And we've definitely seen that boom as people have gone into lockdown. Obviously there was a lot of searches for essentials at the start of the period as people started to think, how do I recreate that spa treatment or my root touch up? How do I do all that at home? What we've definitely seen as the period has evolved is consumers engaging with content at a deeper level than ever before. We Look Fantastic. We've done a number of Look Fantastic live events with brand founders, with beauty experts. Look Fantastic's running an initiative through the Beauty Council, actually, where we've partnered with stylists, makeup artists who haven't been able to get out and work in the field during this period. And they've worked with us to help create content that we can share with consumers whilst they're at home to help them recreate those looks. And, I think there's definitely that beauty enthusiast and that hobby of beauty. I know there was a lot of data published at the start of the period suggesting that cosmetic sales were dropping off because people weren't leaving the house, so they didn't need makeup on. We definitely have seen that come back as we've moved into the period as people have looked to create their own content. TikTok downloads went through the roof. I think they had like 2 billion downloads in the space of May, which is just insane. So beauty is a really good feel-good category for people to be experimenting within this time, and we've definitely seen that as they've shopped more frequently and across wider categories than ever before. There's also been a lot of discovery, a lot of people discovering new products, trying things that you maybe wouldn't try when you're working 9 to 5, things like facial peels that maybe the nervousness of, do I do it on a Saturday? What will my face look like by the time I go back into the office?
We've definitely seen that.
I think one of the categories that's taken me most by surprise is fake tan. Because you think, well, we're in lockdown, why would you need fake tan? But then we're also not getting our summer holidays. So we've seen lots of trial, lots of experimentation, and it's been a great period certainly for brands, and particularly the smaller, more indie brands, to really build that engagement with their consumer and speak to them on a deeper level than I think they've ever spoken to them before, because consumer engagement is that high at the moment. People are looking for content and wanting to consume it via the backload.
Tell me, this is a sort of slight change of tack, but one of the things you said was people are sort of experimenting across the board. I would imagine that colour cosmetics sales have dropped because people haven't been going out so much. If you're wearing makeup for Zoom, it's not like wearing it all day, retouching it, changing it for going out for drinks or dinner in the evening or at the weekend. I'm interested in sales of colour cosmetics post-lockdown, given the hygiene restrictions in store, but also in terms of, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but how do you think sales of colour cosmetics are going to lift post-lockdown online? So given that you've got the barrier of not being able to test it, but that barrier also exists in store now. So are there any opportunities there now?
I think the issue with testing applies to a wider category than just colour cosmetics, if I'm honest. I think I was reading an article last week that was suggesting that 78% of consumers have said that they won't engage with samples in the same way ever again. And I imagine that statistic will possibly be higher when we immediately come out of lockdown and we know a lot of stores aren't able to offer that service. What we've definitely seen through our website is that consumer need for samples and searches for samples is higher than ever before. We've always offered a number of initiatives like select samples on checkout and so forth. And again, engagement through that has been at an all-time high for us. So I think as we come out of this period, online companies can really play a key part in helping customers in that initial browsing period. I think especially in the coming weeks where consumers look to go back into store, and similar to your point before, Anne-Marie, I think it'll be kind of as an end destination. And I think there's a great role that the digital players can help provide in that research period in getting samples into consumers' hands. You know, we've got our Look Fantastic beauty box, which is ultimately like a sampling mechanic that beauty subscribers can subscribe for every month, and the demand for that and through our glossy box has been through the roof in the past 3 months. Sold out in week 1 of every month. So consumers are massively engaged. They're wanting to try a new product. They're wanting to, you know, find the perfect foundation, and the developments that we've seen in technology can really help support in that colour cosmetics category as well. And the other great thing that we've got opportunity with at the moment is people are at home more. So the opportunity to get samples into people's hands while they're at home to engage with is at an all-time high. You know, we've got over a million.
I guess the only struggle, that we have is traditionally, yes, complexion, but most colour cosmetics don't have sampling programs because it's just never been part of it. It's so prohibitively expensive to do. So from the point of view of sort of eyeshadows or blushes or anything that doesn't sort of very neatly come in a sachet, it's always a little bit of a struggle to do that, sort of lipstick, to do that as a sample. I think the other point that I wanted to make is, you know, the whole eco story has had to take almost a full stop as COVID's taken over. And, you know, actually before COVID, we were coming up against, you know, there's some backlash around sample sachets and how can we make these sachets more ecologically sound. And it, you know, it is possible, and technology is out there for that to start. But I think, you know, it's such a confliction, isn't it, for the consumer, or for us as consumers as well, is you want to be able to try the product, but you don't want to have these one-use things that you're then throwing away straight away.
Because plastic has almost gone from being the most vilified product on the planet to the thing that protects us. You know, it's the thing that's kept everything away. So, you know, the sort of the rebranding job around plastic has been done for us, but then the aftermath is, what do you do? There's going to be an awful lot of waste. I'm interested, Alexia, in what you say about the prohibitive cost of sampling colour cosmetics, but picking up on what Rachel said, you know, the sort of the apps and the sort of AI part of that, the sort of the try-on apps, both in store so that those colour consultations can happen remotely, and via the apps themselves on your phone or on your computer screen, are going to be such a help. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, Lucia Peroni, makeup artist, and she said she thinks they're great, and you can get the colour right, but you can't get the texture, you can't really show a sheer colour, and the shape's very difficult to do. And actually with colour cosmetics, so much of it is about the nuance and the detail and the line and the shape. It's not just green eyeshadow and a red lip. It's not that straightforward, and I'm wondering if this will prompt those companies to sort of refine the technology even further. Jo, what do you, I mean, working with luxury brands that probably do operate on the kind of margin that could invest more heavily in sampling, do you think there'll be an appetite for that? Do you think that the luxury brands will invest more in it so that they can keep their customer?
Honestly, I think that they will. I think so much more to drive this will be through technology. I mean, we started work at Harvey Nichols, we're through foundation with Match My Makeup. to get your foundation. And that was generally being able to operate as a customer, knowing what was the shade and what's the foundation that you use today. Is it something that you like? And then using that technology, we were able to then, without even going into store, find the right shade for you. And actually the brands, all of the brands that we involved, they were all actually blown away with how accurate that was. So I think that's using the technology side. But yeah, I do. I think people, brands, as much as retailers, will be looking at everything, but trying to really focus on. Alexia's mentioned about the environment side. I think they will be using that as the future, that they should have been using this time now. I'd like to think of how they manage that sampling, how they can do it as the best, using this time where I'd like to think, have been helping the environment through less travel and less everything, and focusing on that future. So yeah, I do, but I think it'll be in a different way. And it might not happen immediately. I think to expect something like that to happen in 10 weeks, but I think the future of how they expect that to be, maybe in 6 to 12 months, will absolutely happen. And I think sampling more than ever, me as a customer during this period, I've been looking through different like influencers that we work with, but ones that I really trust and believe in rather than maybe what I'd seen before. I know that the people that we'd worked with at Harvey Nichols, being able to bring that alive and seeing that really live come through and mixing them up. And, you know, I've actually cross-shopped now. I've shopped with Colt most recently, Liberties, and having that, you know, Sunday Riley, you know, I hadn't tried the ice. Trying that immediately, there was ways that I'm able to then incorporate without going into bricks and mortar, and that made me think, you know, I want to try more of that. I think it's just how you can get more out of skincare than just one sachet. There's not a lot that I can learn from it other than, you know, what does it feel like from a texture. It's not going to do anything to my skin in one day, but it's just that the ability to see how it will happen. And without a doubt, that's how I'm driven by, you know, going in from a buying point of view. It's that touch and the feel of what that feels like for me and how I think that will react to the customer. So I think more than ever, sampling will continue, but in a different, more sustainable way.
Yeah. I mean, the downside of not being able to test something or being given access to a sample that lasts for a decent period of time is spending money on a product that really doesn't work for you. And it's now going to be impossible for anybody to pass that product on to a friend because it'll have been used. If it's a liquid or even a powder, who knows how long that virus will live on an eyeshadow, for example, or, you know, will it start to proliferate in a face cream? Given the B word, I'm bringing in Brexit, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on as well. Given that the returns policy is very much on cosmetics, is very much governed by EU compliance and hygiene regulations, given that we're coming out of the EU, and I'm going to ask you, Alexia, and also Rachel, because it probably matters more for your online businesses, do you think that returns policy on cosmetics either needs to change or will change? Do you think that the brands and the retailers will be prepared to take the financial hit on a shift like that? Because there are going to be a lot of people buying products that are 100% wasted simply because they don't work on them and they can't do anything, and then they have to throw them away, so it creates waste. What does that equation look like? Sorry, it's probably a bit of a... I don't think
it'll change our returns policy, because if somebody's used a product, we don't take it back.
Yeah.
I think it changes the returns process and the levels of hygiene that you inject into that process. But yeah, returns is such a tiny percentage of our business. I don't think anything will change.
What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think at the moment, with being online players, we've had slightly different returns policies than stores anyway, because there's naturally a higher risk if people are buying cosmetics offline that it might not be right for them. So they are able to return to look fantastic. I think as we move through this period and it continues to evolve, I think it's something that retailers, brands are going to have to be responding to as consumer needs continue to evolve. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done through leveraging that sampling process to get the right product into people's hands first. Also, the volume of content that we've created especially online, with ratings and reviews has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
In the recent period, as consumers have engaged with those products and left reviews. And I think that's maybe been an underutilised source of information that consumers have had before to consider whether a product's right for them or not. And I think it's just going to have to continue to monitor.
Okay. You talked a little bit there about keeping an eye on consumer needs. Do you think that consumers now are more focused on the sort of more feel-good brands? You know, that sort of sense of self-care, wellness, well-being. Have you seen a shift in that direction?
Yeah, I think as we touched on earlier, with beauty being a feel-good category, we've definitely seen that boom during this period. I think everyone, and I'm sure people on the call will agree, we've all had a little bit more time to think about our wellness during this period and our regimes. And I'm sure many of you saw the cosmetics news this morning, where an article has been published saying 59% of women feel that their skin's the best it's ever been during lockdown, as we're all optimising face mask Fridays. Nowhere, especially if you work with us, we like to do it on video calls.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah, and I think that period of people, from just a self-reflection point as well, but I think a lot of people have added into their regimes that feel-good factor, whether it be through things outside of beauty or within beauty. And I hope we see that long continue, because I think it's been a period of great reflection for people, and a lot of healthy changes seem to have been made to people's lifestyles as well.
Yeah, interesting. My final question to you directly, but we do have lots of questions in the sidebar, so I'll lead on to those in a minute, is I want to ask you all, and I'll start with you, Rachel, have your Brexit plans been derailed at all due to the pandemic? Do you see any opportunities there that might not have existed before in terms of negotiation with outside EU member states, or even inside EU member states in terms of manufacturers? Has anything changed?
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking Brexit for years, so the plans have been constantly evolving as we've moved through that period. I think I wouldn't say there's been any derailing through this period. We were prepared for Brexit at the back end of last year, so we opened a warehouse in Poland. We've got offices in Poland, manufacturing in Poland, so we try to protect our supply chain and manufacturing capabilities coming into 2020. I think where we've definitely benefited is being able to leverage that platform to help us with the sheer volume of orders that we've fulfilled through Look Fantastic in recent weeks. We've maintained next day delivery throughout that period, and a big way of us being able to do that has been leveraging that global capability that we built ready for Brexit. So it's definitely give it a good test run.
What about you, Alexia?
It feels like we've already had Brexit twice.
Yeah.
It's like we're calling it Brexit 3 internally at the moment. It's really hard to call because, until we have a little bit more information around no deal or no deal, it's going to be quite difficult. I mean, I think actually our government is probably the most dangerous thing for our industry at the moment when it comes to Brexit, even more so than COVID. So yeah, we'll just be flexible and just act quickly depending on what news we get through.
Jo, I know that you're no longer in Harvey Nichols' business, and you're moving to a country where Brexit isn't even an issue, but is there anything that you're aware of, as a very, very long-standing company when you're at Harvey Nichols around Brexit, given that it's such an international business anyway, global?
I think really reiterating what Rachel said, it feels like we've been through it. As a business, we purchase enough stock just to see, because I think the brands were just as hesitant, understanding how quickly that they could get their stock, their replen. So the communication between us, the brands, the warehousing, the supply chain, that has been as tight as it can be, but it's a case of just seeing as and when it happens, and knowing, I think so much of what we do as retailers is based on relationships, and how you can really, as long as you're as open with everybody about how it's working, that's really how we've acted. There's been meetings upon meetings, but it's just been a case of when it happens, I think that's when we'll react. I think it'll be more from those smaller brands, understanding how packaging and things like that will change and where those dates, how if that will be impacted, and how we as retailers can help support those smaller, more independent brands on making that happen if we're purchasing them from outside. And as much as anything, you want to be a profitable business and not take on everyone's product and fill your warehouse. So I think just keeping that communication with everybody alive as soon as you know what's going on and when, that's been consistent from start to when it was likely to happen to when it is actually going to be in place. So that's been very much at the heart of everything. So yeah.
Something that we've talked about internally at BRANDstand is that given the huge fear around Brexit, but given what's happened with pandemic, it almost feels as though we've been through the worst that could possibly happen. How much worse can it get? I feel there's a sort of sense of positivity about the future, and if we can handle this, we can handle anything.
Yeah, and the camaraderie, I think, of everybody together as well, how this has been handled. I think the one thing with COVID as well, knowing it's a global epidemic and seeing how other countries have reacted and how you can see them start to open, I think it does, for me, it gives me confidence in the UK about how we can get through this together and live with it as long as it will be here. And you can see that with like schools and different things that are going on. But I think out of beauty, everybody, people want to feel good. And I always think of like Leonard Lauder with the red lipstick. That always stays with me through from different things that we've been through. So yeah, I think seeing other people get through it has been a really confidence drive.
The ones that have survived, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some questions from the audience. Has anybody seen an uplift in British brands during this time? Specifically, has there been that sense of kind of local support?
I think Charlotte Tilbury continues to be huge from a British brand, from the launches, and you can see what have happened. A launch that happened at the end of April have been continued to be very strong, and I think you see that constantly through the social messaging of what's coming through alive on Instagram. I think from that side is a British brand, and I think it's constantly in the press about
and they've invested in advertising as well, isn't it? They've been doing TV commercials.
And so I think, ahead of COVID, that was still part of their plan anyway, strategy meetings that attending with the company. But I think that for me is a brand that I can see continue to perform extremely well during this period.
Yeah. Rachel, have you seen a sort of a focus on, I don't know, maybe Elemis as opposed to other skincare as a British brand, or?
I mean, skincare as a category has seen great traction for us. So difficult to pinpoint it specifically to British brands.
Right.
They've definitely seen a great uplift during the period, but not necessarily more so than others.
Yeah, it's been more an indie brand thing for us. So and a lot of our indie brands are British. So it's that category that's really grown.
Somebody's asked the question, have you seen an increase in men shopping across your channels, and what categories have they focused on?
Not particularly cult beauty.
Right. Rachel,
we've seen an increase in men, and it won't surprise anyone with it being hair clippers.
Of course.
Had a lot of we've had an insane amount of views on our content around how to let your lady loose at your hair. Hair clippers is one of our most watched videos during this period.
I love that.
Things like, we've got a few staff sporting some very manly headbands at the moment as well.
What about the lockdown beards?
The hair in lockdown.
What about lockdown beards? Have they stopped buying the shaving products and just focused on cutting the hair instead?
I mean, there's been too many lockdown beards.
It's kind of gone like that, hasn't it?
I know. I really wish. I do wish Boris had done an announcement that beards are not good for COVID.
I was reading something that said that they sort of, can harbour a fair amount of bacteria. But then if that's true, it's also true of the hair on your head. I mean,
it's true.
Sort of panic mongering. Sorry, another question. How much is provenance important to consumers now? So I suppose what the person's asking is transparency, honesty, authenticity. You've all said that your consumers are digging into detail much more. Is that what they're looking for? Are they finding reassurance in provenance?
I mean, we've actually just launched a campaign or an initiative across the site that is with a company called Provenance, where we're harnessing blockchain technology to so it's around proof point transparency, and actually doing the due diligence so that our customers don't necessarily need to, but also giving them access to all of the documentation behind these proof points. And it has been so successful. The customers really have, they've been gobbling it up. And we've seen huge hit rates around the claim, we're calling them the icons, where people are starting to look deeper and deeper into products. And I think, you know, trust is becoming more and more of an important aspect to harness from within our customer base. And it's just about how do you earn trust with everything that you're doing, and giving transparency around the products, the ingredients, the provenance of those ingredients, and where those products are made is becoming an essential part of the customer journey.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about blockchain technology. That's something that came up a year or so ago at a debate another debate I was on, and I think it's very easy to tell the stories, very easy to be a storyteller, because you can get a clever copywriter involved. You can make it sound as good as anything. You know, even an indie brand can sound completely amazing, but with blockchain, you can't lie and you can't go back and change it afterwards. There's no retrofitting or rewriting history. No. And it does feel as though it's the only way to be completely transparent. And I know that quite a few brands are starting to really invest and look quite heavily into that. And these are, I would imagine these are brands that really are truthful and very honest about where their seeds come from, the fact that they are sowing them on our organic soil, and that their processing of the crops is actually being done to a reputable standard.
The difficulty isn't always dishonesty. I think, you know, if you imagine some indie brands, when they're buying, they're having to buy their ingredients in batches, and sometimes the supplier that they're using has sold their entire batch of, say, rose oil to Estee Lauder or one of the bigger companies. So they can't then buy from there. So they need to source it from another. And actually to go through the process of providing the third party documentation that we need to give them the icon, it's a lot of work for a small business. So
and a huge cost as well, I would imagine. You're having to start from scratch.
So it's definitely, it's been hard to get this off the ground, but I think we are building something at the moment that could have amazing repercussions across the whole industry. I really want to build a British standard, like a kite mark that people can trust across the board.
It's incredibly important, and I think that also post-Brexit that really stands for something. I was discussing with somebody the other day, when you live in a country, you kind of take for granted the things that you have that make your country special and that are appealing to people from outside. In the way that, you know, when we go to the States, we're sort of, you know, probably shopping in, I don't know, goodies or somewhere like that, and buying something really cheap because it's quintessentially American. But in the way that Americans will come here and they'll go to Boots and they'll want to buy the sort of, you know, the kind of classic Boots things that we'd be a bit dismissive about. But I think that British kite mark that stands for so much outside the country should increasingly come to mean something for British people as well. We need to be more proud about what we do. We need to shout about it much more.
We have a reputation for being really trustworthy and authentic as a nation. And I think that's why I'm sure we look fantastic. You get a lot of international customers who really, really want to buy from you, even though it's maybe a little bit more on the shipping and they have to wait another couple of days.
Given that you've sort of set up this initiative with Provenance, I've got a question from someone else here saying, can online retailers like Cult Beauty teach lessons to those used to selling in stores? You're going to set yourself up as a school.
I think we can both learn from each other. I mean, I know very little about bricks and mortar, and actually there's things that you understand as a bricks and mortar retailer from being face to face with your customer every single day that we would miss. There's nuances that you would miss. Data cannot tell you that. So I think there's things that can be learnt on both sides.
It's exactly what Joe said earlier about sort of being on the shop floor and watching people.
Yeah.
What do you, I mean, do you think that there's likely in future to be more sort of information sharing between different retailers, or do you think that information's out there anyway and you just have to go and look for it?
I think when it comes
I hope that there's more.
Say again, sorry.
I would certainly hope that there's more as we come out of this period. I think that Corona's taught us so much in terms of community, you know, both outside of work, but I think also for us as a beauty community, you know, some of the changes that people working in this community have had to go through with being furloughed, with store closures. I think we've got such a wealth of information between us that can be used to really empower people and change lives and make people feel better every day. It would be a shame if we don't come out of this and share more data between us to help drive people forward and recover.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rachel. I think also by having, you know, like BBC, like Anna Marie, that obviously that you started, and CW, there's such a mix of great people within the beauty industry that just want to improve it. That's all, and it's about shouting loudly and really working together. You know, I was a board member at CW UK, and I was on there, Harrods were on there. There's so many great people, both offline and online, that you can really just drive through and learn from one another. It's not, I think, you know, when you think about working behind in the store, you know, you're competing against one another. Everybody wants to get the best sales and things, but actually everybody just has to think about the customer. That's what we're there for. We're there for the customer from start to finish. And I think, you know, thinking about the society from the beginning, everybody wants to share those best practices with one another. I know it was something that we would speak a lot at the board about, what we could share with one another. And I'm sure it's exactly the same for the British Beauty Council, you know. So I think there's always that intent to share best between one another. It's not like we're sharing trade secrets or things like that, you know. No. That would be very different. But if it's about bettering the industry and improving that for the customer, I think without a doubt, you know, I'd love to learn more now about the whole province from Alexia, even from where I'm going to, because I think it's something for me as a customer, and you see so much more now online through social media. People are absolutely interested in ingredients, wear, testing, everything. That is such an important part of that purchase from start to finish. So I really do think it's important. I mean, it's something that I would absolutely look up now.
It's interesting you say that, because Alexia, both you and I sort of share a background in journalism, and I would never have not asked those questions. It's part of doing your investigation before you write about something, because in featuring it in a magazine, you're actually recommending it. You're saying to somebody, I rate this enough to send you out to spend £47 on it. And you don't want to give the wrong information out. So you make sure that you're fully informed. What has happened though, with the sort of drop in magazine, you know, the kind of death of magazines in some ways, but also the reduction in those really in-depth editorials and a lot of that information appearing online, but it being disseminated by people who don't ask those kind of questions. It does feel as though that's reduced down to some extent. I think that I'm kind of winding round to something here. So I am slightly rambling. I do this. Alexia, what you were saying about, sorry, Joe, what you were saying about it's customer first. I think that that's automatically the case with online retailers, because when you're selling a multitude of brands, you don't have those brands in front of your face and their staff in front of you, sort of with that competitive edge. You're actually responsible for making sure that they all perform well. And I do think it's so important for the consumer to be properly informed. But I think nowadays that's through different channels. It's not the same ones that we
There's
used
a responsibility for the consumer, but there's also the responsibility for your partners, your brand partners as well. And I'm sure you feel the same, guys. But you know, you have an ecosystem around you, and you are helping those brands grow up, and supporting a lot of female founders, a lot of new entrepreneurs. And I think, you know, that is also a really important part of what we do. It is a business ecosystem, and it supports so many different people. And I know it's something that the British Beauty Council have really focused on. You know, this is a grassroots industry, and it provides so many jobs for so many people, and we've been so underestimated for so many years, and it is time to really break out of that.
I've got another question here. What advice would you give small retailers now? What should they be focusing on? These are, you know, different scales to your businesses. If you were to start now as a small retailer, what should you be doing?
For me, you know, I think, and it's learning from, I would say, what's happening now. If you look at like butchers and different things like that, going to your local. I was reading, I don't know if anyone saw Mary Porter's this morning, and she was talking about, you know, from a book point of view, this is aside from beauty, but learning, you know, the size and scale of Amazon. And she purchased from her local like bookseller, and the difference of what they were able to do was how they bound that book up with like brown paper and then folded it around with, and then included like flowers and things on that. Amazon would never ever be in a position to do that. You know, it's like sell, and do it so successfully. But what that leaves you with as a customer, and thinking they've really thought about me, how it's been packaged and how I've received that, is something, and the memory of what you walk away with and telling that. I mean, that left a message with me, and I would tell someone that, like I've just like.
Oh, you did.
Exactly. But I do think things like that, the service that you receive is the reason why you go back into somewhere. So I think, you know, I think how people react now to COVID-19, how they're perceived with how they've looked after their staff during this, how they've looked after customers, will be where you shop first, and where that experience that you've had either online or in bricks and mortar, like it has been before, it's the reason that you would tell a girlfriend or a guy that you would go back into that, and it's all that word of mouth. So I think for me, it's about the service and the education of what you know about a product. You know, I wouldn't just buy any old product. You know, there's a reason of what you love about it, and I think that's what you need to convey when you're selling something, in the way that that person in the bookshop sold that item to Mary. It was how it was packaged. You know, she could have got the same book from Amazon at maybe at a different speed, but the fact that it came to our house and how it was, I think is really important personally.
It's about making it special.
Yeah.
Rachel, what do you think? I mean, I wanted to pick up on something you were saying about Glossybox earlier.
Yeah.
Because there was a bit of a drop off in attention from those sort of sampling model businesses. But do you think that's something that's going to build again? I mean, there's such an opportunity, isn't there, to sort of expose people to wider choices with a very much lower economic risk.
Definitely, yes. I mean, the results that we've seen through Glossybox in recent months, as people have looked to try new products at home, has been phenomenal. You know, new people signing up to receive boxes has been incredible. I think for those smaller businesses, things like Glossybox can provide a great opportunity of getting your product into people's hands. And for smaller retailers right now, my advice would be to think big. You know, the barriers to entry into this market have never been lower than they are right now. And this is the time to go for it. The sky really is the limit.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to just checking questions. Sorry. Somebody's asked about, I mean, it's a bit of a wider question, but is it possible to get as much enjoyment shopping for beauty online? I mean, this is something that's always been leveled against online beauty retailers. How do you make it special? How do you make it feel like that conversation with a friend, you know, the experience, the sort of tactile quality of everything? Do you think any of that will change in the future?
I mean, we've always tried to make cult beauty as entertaining as possible. And I think, harking back to my journalistic background, and all of the copy, including the how-tos and the ingredients list, is put together by a beauty editor. So it is meant to be a really fun experience, even just reading the product details page. And then if you layer on the content that you're supporting it with, the videos and the whole Instagram and general social storytelling that you're doing around it is about the journey.
And it's about making it fun. I think the content makes it fun, social can make it fun. You know, it's very easy to browse online, and I think more importantly, in the period that we're in at the moment, you can browse at your own pace. You know, it isn't 2 meters apart and you've got to go through the store. You can take the time to luxuriate in reading that content, learning more about new brands and new products, and taking the time to search for everything that you need.
Yeah. I've just, by text, not in the sidebar chat, I've just had a question from another journalist, Claire Coleman. She's looking for quotes, and I suppose this is a bad place to do it. So she's got a question for all of you. Will on-counter beauty lessons and makeup lessons be available, and how will they impact on how we buy? So this probably applies less to online people. And Joe, you're not working at Harvey Nichols anymore, but do you have a view on that? Is anybody aware of how that's going to happen? I know, for example, that Boots is doing sort of more distant kind of advice, and they're encouraging people to experiment with the makeup themselves, and then they're directing them. So
I think, you know, I mean, like you said, I'm not there anymore. I think what we learned in the week before we did go into lockdown, seeing the likes of Lauder first and then the other brands followed, it was about showing the customer actually on the individual, like the actual expert themselves. So they were showing the customers how the different shades look, how to apply. Obviously there's different shades between, you know, the customer themselves, but the technique, the texture and everything, how they could see from the lighting. That was something that was in practice. You know, as and when that comes back in, I'd assume that would be something that would be taken on sooner, until we get to the point that there is the confidence that the virus is up, where we are able to mix with one another. I think that's how it will be. I think it will be very much taken on by the brand themselves before the retailer, because the brands are the experts in what that they do. So Estee Lauder may have an opinion of how they want theirs to be, L'Oreal, all the different groups between. But throughout this period, the one thing that I am very much aware of, the makeup artistry and brands, you know, I had a great conversation with Hourglass, and the education they've been having every day with their teams on Zoom and on different formats have been about really improving their makeup artistry skills and how they're communicating and things like that. So that will be stronger than ever about the communication together. So, you know, not as a quote or anything like that, but
yeah,
after,
sure.
but I think it's a case of bit by bit, everybody will see how it will go. But, and learning from, like what I said earlier, what they're doing in the likes of China, what they're doing in Canada when they've opened their stores, and taking that on board and seeing if that's had any impact, and then going from there. So
I think the trend we've seen definitely emerge through lockdown is the creation of content. So people at home creating those over-the-counter makeup looks, you know, where they're not trained makeup artists, experimenting at home and sharing that with a community of other beauty followers, and sharing ideas and creating that content together. And I think that's something a lot of brands should continue to leverage as we move out of this period, because there's huge value in it, and there's such validity in people having that experience and being able to share those experiences to continue to build the community is really powerful.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, thank you. That's actually a really nice place to end. We're at 3 o'clock, so I just wanted to thank you all for taking part, and thanks so much to the audience for asking those questions. It's been really informative. Obviously, this whole scenario is going to evolve as we unlock down, as we begin to move forward. So I've no doubt at some point in the future there'll be a whole other debate around beauty retail. Don't forget to join us for the next BRANDstand Brainstorm on the 18th of June at 2 p.m. Tickets are free through Eventbrite, and details are on BRANDstand social, and that's at brandstand.com. Sorry, at BRANDstandcoms. I get this wrong every time. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. Really nice to see you all, and stay safe and well.
You too. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.